man was walking in the woods one day when he saw a bear out of the corner of his eye. He stopped, said a silent prayer. God, I know you can do all things. Will you please make this bear a fellow Christian? The bear caught up to the man, placed his paw on the man's shoulder, and said, Brother, will you pray with me? Dear God, for this meal that I am about to receive, make me truly thankful. This is The Christian Bear with Dr. Ben Hilskamp. Welcome to episode 46 of The Christian Bear. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Hilskamp. Happy Hanukkah to those who celebrate. Hanukkah began on Sunday, December the 18th, and extends through Monday, December the 26th this year. May the festival of lights be happy, holy, warm, and filled with biological and chosen family. May the light of those relationships and of that love shine as a beacon that hate has no home with us, and hate will never win. It is my pleasure today to welcome my good friend, colleague, and someone that I have learned so much from, the fierce Sara Blair-Medeiros. Sara, who uses she, her, and they, them pronouns, is a queer, multiracial, Jewish, transracial adoptee woman of color. Born and raised in the Bay Area of California, Sara is passionate about gender equity work and social justice. Her approach to that work is founded in her intersectional life experience and the philosophy that authentic human relationships are a crucial part of the collective struggle for equity and liberation. Sara is passionate about supporting students and communities in their multitude of intersecting identities, which she has done through the creation of brave, authentic spaces for individual and community dialogue, through critical, self-reflective practice, listening to music, her dog and all dogs, cooking, trying new things, and spending time with her family and friends. Sara believes that the disruption of socially constructed hierarchies can begin with community healing and empowerment. Sara received her master's degree in higher education and student affairs administration from the University of Vermont, and her BA in sociology, interethnic relations, with a minor in cultural education and applied psychology from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Sara now lives in Woodland, California, with her wife Michelle and their mini Australian Labradoodle Hobie. Join me in welcoming Sara Blair-Medeiros to The Christian Bear. So, Sara, thank you so much again for being on this episode of The Christian Bear. I really appreciate the time that you're taking to give us some perspective on what you believe and how you frame belief. So to get us started, I've been sarcastically calling this the easy question. What do you believe?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if that's really an easy question, Ben. I mean, have you ever really asked an easy question? I don't feel like you are a person of easy questions. I feel like you get straight to the nitty-gritty, the deep.
No,
The
I'm
deep
not big on easy
you want to go deep
questions.
first. Yeah, you want to go deep really fast. But I'm glad to be here and I appreciate the invitation. It's a really wonderful to come full circle because I feel like this, when you ask, takes me back to sitting in a tea house and, kind of agonizing over our master's theses and trying to figure out how do we have the catharsis and also, not overwhelm the rest of the people that are going to be reading this, right? And also, how do we keep it below 100 pages, which I don't think either one of us was actually below 100 pages, courtesy of the
Nope.
deep questions that you ask. So what do I believe? Oof. That, I mean, it is the question, I feel like, right now, right? It is the question that needs to be asked of not just those who may be practicing or who may have been raised in faith-based households, or even, that's a very human question. Like, what do people believe in? And I think my honest answer is I am constantly still figuring that out. I think that if you had asked me this question, pre-pandemic, I would have been like, yeah, I totally believe in humanity and I believe in all of us to come together, and I believe that we can handle, the tough things, and we're going to be able to get through it. And I don't know if it's not necessarily that I don't believe that anymore. I would say probably I am like in the full blown questioning stage of, are we actually able to handle the tough things, and are we able to come together as communities to actually get ourselves through the things that are affecting all of us? I don't know. I really don't know. I think that if we're thinking about and talking about spirituality and faith, I believe in taking the time to connect with self and do the self reflection and to understand the individual relationship to whatever it is that one believes in, right? Whether that, and I say the believes in part because I'm like, there's people that believe in higher power, there's people that believe in truth, there's people that believe in honesty, values, there's people that believe in, self, there's people that believe in whatever you want to name it, right? Whatever the it thing is. I would say like the more foundational, basic, non-complicated, I guess, or less complicated answer to the question is I believe in something greater than myself, that there is something that connects all of us, and maybe we call that energy, maybe that's what it is. I would say like I'm the one, if you'd asked me before, and I think you and I have had conversations about this, like what is and who is God, and I do believe that there is a higher like power. And I think that right now I'm questioning like whether or not that's like an actual like, book being that like had words and all of that, or is it more of this energy that connects all of us that, indicates that there is something greater than just meeting this person for the first time, that maybe we were meant to meet this person. I don't know if you call that destiny. I don't know if you call that fate. I don't know. I don't know if I can label anything. I would definitely say or classify myself as a spiritual person. I definitely believe in like astrology. I believe in human design. I believe in zodiacs. I believe that we are born and like there are things that we are meant to do, that we have a life's purpose. How we achieve or live out or get to the whatever the life's purpose is going to depend on choices that we make along the way. Which I think is why I believe in this more collective connection type of thing that doesn't necessarily have any kind of definition of Christians are all connected and Jews are all connected and Muslims are all connected. Like, I think that I can be connected to all of those people regardless of faith. Yeah, I still don't, I don't know. I Ask me that in 5 years, Ben. See what happens then.
I mean, heck, ask me that in 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, seriously. Ask me tomorrow. It'll probably be different, or we can revisit it after the end of this conversation. But yeah, it's a great question.
I'm curious. You mentioned particularly some of our conversations in grad school, and just for our listeners, Sarah and I both did our master's degree, or at least our first master's degrees, in higher education at the University of Vermont. And I know from those conversations, I know from just knowing you that your background is in the Jewish faith. So I wonder, with that sort of background, and now that I'm thinking about it, I think you are the only person on this series of the podcast who's not coming from either a Christian background or a non-religious background. So I wonder if,
Mm,
and I don't want to put words in your
mm.
mouth, but how have you come to hold the beliefs that you now hold? And if you feel comfortable commenting on that from a perspective of having been raised Jewish or what that means, that's great. If not, again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, absolutely. Definitely not putting words in my mouth. I think that's a great question as well. I think for me, I was raised in a relatively secular, not relatively, I was raised in a secular Jewish household. Both my parents identify as either atheist or agnostic, or have gone back and forth between the two. Um, I was the first. So on my dad's side, there were four grandchildren. My sister and myself. I'm the oldest of all four of us. So my sister and I, and then my dad's sister, my aunt, had two kids as well. My two cousins, Anna and Maya. We grew up across the street from each other, and so very close knit Jewish family. I would say that we were raised very culturally Jewish. So and very secular, as I said, secularly Jewish. So there wasn't any there wasn't any pressure to go to a house of faith, like go to synagogue or temple. There wasn't any pressure to understand the prayers or talk about Jewish faith and the religious aspects of being Jewish. There was a lot of choice in my family. I think that really stemmed from my grandmother, so my dad's mom, really kind of instilling this idea that like humans are humans and it doesn't matter who or what they decide or the choices that they make. It's our responsibility to take the time to understand who they are and why they make the choices that they make, and also with limits, right? Like if somebody is actively trying to hurt or oppress or harm you, absolutely don't give them give them the opportunity to like take that time in your day. But if they are coming to the table, then there's always an opportunity to learn to understand, right? Like who that person is. And so I think that's where my very like there's a connection, like human connection, my belief in human connection comes from. I think the more spiritual aspect of things comes from that. Um my grandmother was absolutely my person, and was the person I'm most like, even though I'm adopted and we were not blood related. I think personality wise, energy wise, ideologically wise, praxis wise. We were both educators. I mean, she was in K through 12 education for her entire life. Um, but she was the hub. She was the one who was like, we open our door to people. We believe that people are good. We believe that people inherently are going to seek to understand. We believe that as Jews, like that the table is always going to be open to anyone who needs to be fed. And so I grew up culturally in this environment where like food was plentiful and culture was plentiful, and we connected over those things and we shared those things with people. There were literally, I mean, talking about this is actually relatively good timing because, Thanksgiving is tomorrow. And while I am, not necessarily a huge fan of promoting the history of Thanksgiving, I will say when people ask me, like, are you celebrating? I say, I'm celebrating the opportunity to gather together with my family and to be in the same space together without the pressures of having to take time off or perform the next day or go to work, and to like relax and rejuvenate and connect. And that's what Thanksgiving was always about. That's what every holiday was about. And that's a very renewal, liberal, kind of Jewish ideology, I think. Um, and I say I think because, granted, I can only speak from my experience, but my Jewish experience was very much that. All the Jews that I connected with and were in my community were very secular, very cultural, and we shared stories. I mean, I learned about, like, we did Passover. We, shared stories at the Passover table. We did the seders. We did all of that. But it wasn't like you need to do these things because that is what Jews do religiously. It was, we do these things because we come together and we connect as family. We did Hanukkah. We did all that stuff. But I was never forced to do it one way or the other. I always had an opportunity to choose. And so when I was given the opportunity to do a bat mitzvah and to study the Torah, I opted to do it because for me, it wasn't about like you're obligated. There was no obligation. And so it was purely about my own curiosity. And granted, knowing that I would get a lot of gifts from a lot of people at the end of it was great. But I think along the way, as I grew and came to understand the more complex nature of studying the word of God within the Torah context, and had two rabbis, like they were a couple, Sarah and Abraham, who were also very renewal, not necessarily secular, but like very liberal aspect of Judaism or sect of Judaism. They instilled in me this curiosity to understand that part of Jewish life, that part of what being Jewish is or could be. And so that's where I think that spark of believing in a higher power, a higher energy, or let's just say God for now, that's where that came about, because they fostered it in a way that allowed me to be curious. And I think also there was no pressure to do all of the things. So when you're bat mitzvah in a more conservative temple, you have the Haftorah and you do a whole service and you have to do it in the temple or synagogue, and you can't choose mine. I did not do the Haftorah. I was allowed to not do it. I had a pretty good section of the Torah. I had Noah and the Ark, right? Like that is like I drew the lottery and like won, right? Like my younger cousin, who was the only other one out of the four of us to get bat mitzvahed, had to do hers. Her Torah portion was on all of the kosher laws. So boring. So incredibly boring. And she was in a much conservative temple environment. So like she had to do it in temple. And she did it a few years after I got bat mitzvahed, but mine was my parents rented out like a really beautiful like event space up in like the Tilden Park area. And so mine was a lot more vibrant. Like I did not do it in temple. I had a woman as a rabbi. That is like before, we're talking 13. I was 13, so I'm 35 now. Yes, I just said my age. But that was like a number of years ago at this point. What was that? What is that? Like over 20 years ago? So back then, like female rabbis, women identified rabbis, trans rabbis, gender nonconforming rabbis, like that wasn't like really a thing back then yet. So I had a very different environment, and that really fostered a sense of like, be curious, ask questions, interrogate, and learn. As long as you are like wanting to do that, we're open to that. So I think that that's really how I got to this place of being comfortable with not necessarily having to put myself in a box for folks. And then of course I did birthright, which most good Jewish American kids do. Taking full advantage of a free trip to Israel, Palestine, and being able to explore. And I went with my sister, who opted not to do the bat mitzvah route at all. And we got to explore and like really interrogate. And we chose a more secular based trip. So like for listeners, like Birthright, the whole goal of it is to connect Jewish American and Jewish Canadian youth with Israeli youth, and to build that relationship and foster that kind of, you know, continued connection that our places are, and our governments and all those things are, you know, it's relatively Zionist motivated, right? um but they have different levels. So they have super secular and cultural trips, and then they have like very religious based trips. And we opted to do a more secular based trip, and it opened my eyes to so much, and also allowed me to interrogate. Like, I asked all kinds of questions, not to mention I was the only Black Jew on the trip, so everybody else was white. That's another aspect to all of this too, right? Being Black and living at the intersections of what that means. So I do a lot of interrogating all the time, but I've never met a space where I haven't been able to interrogate or question, and that's always been fostered. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that perspective. So, I, I'm not going to ask you the third question I had on my sheet because A, you've pretty much already gotten there, and B, I feel like it's a sort of almost a given at this point. But I'm curious, given that you identify as someone who is spiritual, perhaps even at times would identify with faith, how does that help you or not help you given the world in which we're living? I think what has been heavy on my heart lately is the shooting in Colorado. But feel free to take this question whichever way you would like to go. But I'm curious if your spirituality has any effect in that.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. Another very easy question from
Totally
Ben.
easy question.
um, you know, it's I think it's hard. It's hard. I mean, existence is hard right now, especially for folks that are marginalized. Um, and I mean, you were there when I came out. I guess not necessarily came out, but like finally invited myself to, you know, release any kind of denial that I might have been in. And I think I think that speaks to, you know, I was 25 when I finally kind of came into my own with regards to my sexual orientation, and being a queer and identifying as queer, and acknowledging that I love women, and that's where I'm at. And the reason why I say this is because I think that that was somewhat of a spiritual awakening, right? And I think also I think about why it took so long to get there, right? Because I knew back then, right? Like before that, I knew. Um, and I think it's because I hold so many identities that have historically been super marginalized. I think there's, you know, being a woman of size and being a full bone, like boned woman, and how the world views and is not built for people of size, right? There's that. I think that there's also being Black and being mixed, and being very Black. Like, clearly people can identify me as Black. Like, I do not pass as white, that's for sure. I may be light skinned, and that's a whole nother conversation around colorism, but I do not pass as white. And so I am viewed as such. And then there's the Jewish aspect of things and the intersections of like race and religion, and being expected to be Christian and understand that because most Black folks are. And then there's also being ostracized and or finding that there is like extensive amounts of racism within the Jewish community. that then is like hidden, and when you do call it out, there's the like, well, I deal with anti-Semitism. Um so I know what it's like, and how could I be blah 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 blah, right? How could I be racist? When I'm like, you dealing with anti-Semitism has nothing to do with you being or not being racist. like that just is what it is. Doesn't make you any less white in this country. And then there's the very real, like, being a person who has navigated pretty significant depression and like having anxiety and like all those things. So like then there's the mental health aspect of things. And I think it's like one of those, I don't want to add another marginalized identity. I think that played a lot into like my denial of like, I don't like, why would you want to deal with that? And I say all that to say, to answer your question around how my spirituality gets through things, I think that over time I realized that it's not necessarily about like diving deep or like running from the issues and hiding in the spirituality, right? Like I think sometimes people who are superly like intensely religious sometimes hide from the very real discomfort that we might face in life and ignore the very real like things that need to happen in order to kind of move through that stuff. And I think that the people that really used faith as a way to get through that I knew and that I had experience with were folks that did a lot of that. Like a lot of hiding and a lot of like throwing self into faith and going to church to pray all the time and like God will get me through it and God will get me through it and God will get me through it. And you know, I think that I witnessed the consequences of that intense like throwing into, you know, and I think about folks that are like, well, you know, the whole like religious movement around not trusting Western medicine. I'm like, yeah, sure, don't trust Western medicine, but like there's other options. Right? But like not trusting any of that at all, which then leads to like maybe people passing or transitioning way before their time, right? Or having quality of life that isn't great because of that. And I think about, you know, the throwing into faith and like praying the gay away. And like, I think about that whole movement. I think about also these moments where people are like, oh, well, God will provide. And I'm like, also like this person is oppressing you. like that's not going to change because that person is doing these things, not something else, right? So I think that I struggled a lot with like using my faith as an opportunity or my spirituality as a way to get through things um until the pandemic, honestly. So like this is very recent for me. And I think that with everything that went on with Black people being systematically killed by police, um, during a time where we were all isolated in our homes and only had ourselves and our whomever was in our immediate families and our immediate circles to really kind of exist with and process through those things. And we are now like there's a screen and there's no like physical touch, like there's no other ways for people to really kind of engage with you other than like making like setting a time and like meeting on Zoom. I think that that's what forced me to realize that like I have other like I can use my spirituality to get me through these things. And so I do sit and I reflect more. And I don't know if I would call it necessarily praying, like, but I do speak to whomever, right? I do like send up. I'm just gonna say I'm just gonna call it prayers. Like I do send up a prayer too. Like I do ask for support. I do say like, okay, all right, we need a, Sarah, you need to come to whomever moment, and you need to like get your life together, and like we're gonna get through this. I do take a lot more intentionality when I light the Hanukkah candles with my wife, who is Catholic, born and raised, right? Um, and I do send energy to folks, and I do think about those people on a regular basis, and I do take the time to be a little more slow in how I approach things. Um, and I think that has to do with the fact that I have done so much work around my existence as like a marginalized person who holds so many other identities as well that are like super privileged. Um, and my students, they also really force me to like do the things and think about the things too. Um, and then the other defining thing during the pandemic that happened for me is my grandfather passed, my last grandparent. And I had the honor of being able to be present for that transition. And I think seeing, like, bearing witness to like death's arrival is one of the most spiritual and vulnerable things that someone can go through. Um, and I am forever grateful to the folks that ran the home that my grandfather was in for making that space available for my family, for my mom, my sister, and my dad. Like all four of us were present, so that we could bear witness and honor my grandfather and be in community with each other during a time where we were being so incredibly isolated from one another. And I think that also forced me to really view life differently. That was a pivotal moment. So I think, like, hopefully that answers the question. I, I think it does.
That was an amazing answer to my question, so thank you. Particularly because I gave you a question that was like the question version. Excuse the very bellicose language I'm about to use, but it was basically
I
like a
mean,
hand grenade sort of question. Just like,
I
here,
mean,
take,
I
blow
expect
up.
nothing less from you. Yes, yes. Of
Well, at
course.
least you
You
know
know I
me,
have nothing but love for
and you still
you.
like me, so same, same. So to kind of round questions out, and again, yet another easy question. If you had to boil your beliefs down into one, maybe two core fundamental beliefs,
Why you gotta
what
do
would
this
they
to
be?
people? Good Lord. I just,
It's kind of like those what were they? Oh, six
yeah.
word description, 6 word
Yeah. It's like,
missions
what?
or whatever that we had to do in grad school.
I spent so much of my life learning all these words, and you want me to boil my life down to six. Yeah, what were those? There were like 6 words to like explain your life story or something like that, for your life story.
Was it like a 6 word memoir? Was that what it was?
Yeah, that's what it was, the 6 word memoir. And I'm like, seriously, do you see me? Like, no, there's not enough words to describe my memoir. Seeing as though I went like way over the word limit for my thesis. As did you, because we had so much to say. Um, yeah, and then you went on and you wrote a whole dissertation, which amazing, by the way.
Where I also
Um,
went over the word limit.
oh, I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. So, to answer your question about core fundamental beliefs, I think Ooh, that's, yeah. Good Lord. Hard question. Uh, Honestly, I think it's, I think it would honestly have to be that people deserve to live in a world and live a life where they do not have to worry about their liberation and their freedom being taken from them. I think that, and I don't mean like patriotic freedom that many people in this country espouse. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, that's all good and well and great. Like, yeah, we want the freedom to like do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not even talking about the, very complicated conversations about, gun control or the right to carry or bear arms and the constitutional, I'm not talking about that. Like body autonomy. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about like true liberation. I'm talking about the very real fact that we are all bound to each other, and folks do not care to like really take the time to recognize that our actions and our choices have very real consequences for others. And I'm talking about liberation from the way in which our society has been built, and because it honestly, it doesn't matter what you identify as, how you identify, we are all essentially shackled to the way things are. And yeah, I am the first to say that like I perpetuate that in many ways. Like I feed into capitalism, and that is because do I want to put food on my table? And so like how do you subversively start to like push back and challenge these systems that are holding us all kind of captive to the usual everyday? And so I truly 100% believe that people globally within this and within our American society that we deserve liberation, like true liberation. And do I have an answer about what that looks like? Not really. But it sure as heck ain't this. It is not waking up every day for like 4 days to news reports that people have been shot and killed. It's not like, and like, we literally just like a couple weeks ago woke up and on the same day there were 2 shootings in one day. And I'm just like, what is happening in this world? Like, these are, the canary is dead. Like the canary is gone. It has died. It died a while back. And we have some very serious things that we need to confront as a nation. That we just like people just don't want to confront. And it's exhausting. So I mean, I truly wish for liberation, like real liberation and like unshackling from things. And maybe that's starting with like people really deserve to not have to live in fear. I truly believe that people should have access to things and should not live in fear and should be fully liberated from the shackles of the systems that are like keeping us down. And I know that that's like, very I don't know what the word is, like utopian and maybe also very liberal if we're talking about things. But I'm gonna own it.
I was going to say very Freudian
Yeah,
or
yeah. Freudian,
whatever the would it be Hooksian?
very like lore, like Audre Lorde. I mean, yeah, I mean all of that stems from Angela Davis, Black Panthers. Like, yes, I 100% own that there are like lots of strong Black feminists that inform my spiritual belief as well. If you could even go so far as to say that Black feminism is spiritual, is a spiritually, it's like, it's like total like religion, I guess you could say. Um, yeah, but I want people to be able to, I want us to be able to live with each other and ourselves. Like, I just don't understand why we can't. And that's a rhetorical question that I have answers to and ideas around why. But like, why can't we live with each other? Why has it got to be so hard? Why do we collectively make it so dang difficult to live with each other and ourselves? Like, I'm like, some of these people, I'm like, I want to look at you. I'm like, how do you sleep at night? How do you go home and how do you sleep at night? Because I have trouble sleeping over some of the things that I do. 'Cause I'm not perfect, but the things I do are sure as heck are not the the level that some of these folks are doing. Like, I just don't know. So yeah, I want everybody to be able to get good rest and sleep because we are liberated and we're able to like exist and like truly coexist with each other.
Amen. 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 So, Sarah, thank you so much for responding to four very difficult, quote unquote, easy questions. Um,
Very easy.
very easy. So, like I said beforehand, I'd love to leave some time at the end of each one of these episodes for my guests to either add anything that they didn't get to say or to promote or platform anything that they're working on. So, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I am happy. I mean, I am doing a lot of like wedding and event planning stuff, but I know that that's pretty much basically located in and around the California, Northern California, and like that area. But folks, I'm always open to supporting folks and thinking more critically about how we can be better in that industry and more inclusive and all that kind of stuff. But I think the biggest thing is the vast majority of my work is really centered around doing equity and like liberation work. And if folks are interested in doing that around gender equity, racial justice, that kind of thing, or they need folks to come and talk about those things and do that work, I do a lot of foundational based like meeting people where they're at and all that kind of stuff. I am happy to come do that. My 9 to 5 is as the associate director at the UC Davis Women's Resources and Research Center. And so I I'm happy to consult with folks, and I do a lot of that work already. Have a lot of friends in the equity and inclusion field who are always more than happy to come and do consultation work and um, support other organizations to do that work. I've done consults for nonprofits and for larger corporations and all that. So definitely always open to hearing from folks if they need support with those kinds of things. Although there are great folks and organizations in and around the Ohio area as well. So yes, aka you. And Love Boldly doing amazing things. So yeah.
Well, thank you for that, even though I did like signal to myself. Um, but I will definitely, for listeners who might be particularly in the California, Northern California area, I will put links in the episode description to both Sarah's wedding planning and event planning business, as well as to the UC Davis Women's Resource and Research Center.
Yep, that's it.
I will put links to both of those, which are great ways to get in touch with Sarah if you have anything you might want to work with her on. I will more than personally vouch for how amazing she is.
Aw. Thanks, Ben.
So thanks again, Sarah, for giving up your time and for being a guest on the Christian Bear. I really am appreciative of you coming on and recording an episode.
Absolutely. It was my absolute pleasure. And again, like, thank you so much for inviting me. This was definitely really wonderful to kind of have those full circle coming back to those memories of us sitting in a tea house, having these kinds of conversations. So I appreciate you, Ben.
This has been The Christian Bear with Dr. Ben Hilsky.